Hi, the participant on the phone with the phone number 559-765-1212. Could you let us know who you are? If there's anyone else that's calling in, I have several folks who are calling in, it looks like.
Yeah, this is Napolo with CP&E. I'm having a little network connectivity issue getting my computer back up.
Okay. Napolo, is that correct?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hello, this is Georgia calling with LAFCO. My phone number is 831-262-3082.
Thank you, George.
Oh, and just clarifying, Napolo, my phone number is 650-796-4148.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 2:03. I think we should go ahead and get started. Rob, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Christine. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for your time today and for joining us for our RTP Roundtable meeting. We'd like to go ahead and get started with welcome and introductions. So if we want to go through, I think it'd be most efficient to do that in roll call form first for those voting members, and then we can go through for those that are non-voting that are joining us today, just to give us a little bit of introduction. Janine, can you handle that for us?
You're on mute, Ginny.
Okay. City of Clovis, David Merchant.
Good afternoon, this is Dave.
City of Coalinga, Sean Brewer. City of Fireball. City of Fowler. City of Fresno, Dan Zach. Is there anybody representing City of Fresno?
Do we have an alternate for City of Fresno if Dan is not here?
This is Sophia. That could possibly be me.
Thank you, Sophia.
Yes.
City of Huron. City of Kerman.
Here.
Oh,
Paul Serino for City of Huron.
City of Kerman. City of Kingsburg. Mendota. Orange Cove. Parlier. Reedley, Rob Terry.
Here.
The City of San Joaquin. City of Sanger. City of Selma, Joey Daggett. County of Fresno, Mohammed Karsan. San Joaquin Valley Air District, Crystal Unker.
Janine,
My name's Crystal Unker.
Janine, I think Mohammed is on, but he doesn't have audio for some reason.
Okay. He usually calls in from a phone number, right? Mohammed, if you're calling in from a phone, *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, LAFCO, George Unk. George, I think you're on the line.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Caltrans, Jamaica.
David, are you filling in for Jamaica?
Yes.
Okay. Transportation Urban, Carolina Illick.
Hi, this is Carolina representing Transit for the urban area.
Thank you. Public Transportation Rural, Moses Stites. Active Transportation, Tina Sumner.
Yes, I'm here. Tina Sumner.
Affordable Housing, Michael Duarte. Broad-Based Business, Eric Vonberg. Building Development, Mike Prandini.
I'm here.
Education, George Cummings.
Here.
Environment, Adam Livingston.
This is Adam.
Environmental Justice, Leslie Martinez. Measure C Oversight, Kevin Hamilton. New Technology, Joseph Oldham. Public Health Advocate, Keith Berkfold.
Keith's here.
Utilities, anybody representing PG&E?
Yeah, and Apollo Gomez here.
Thank you. Water Agency, Sergeant Green. Gail Miller.
She's here.
Jim Hunter.
Yeah.
Sal Pacelli.
Here.
Thank you. We have 17 voting members on the line.
And also want to make sure that David Berletic from the city of Sanger is here. I don't think that that his audio showed up, but he is in attendance.
Okay.
And Janine, I'm letting Eric Vonberg into the meeting right now. He should be joining momentarily.
Okay, so that brings our number to 19.
And this is Dan Zach, City of Fresno. I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Okay, do we have anybody that is a non-voting member that is online with us today that we want to make sure we introduce?
Yes, I'm here. Roger Brown for the African American Farmers of California.
Terrific. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you.
Joe Prada with the Department of Public Health.
Nick Palladino, Business Action Club.
Rob, this is Eric Vonberg. I just joined.
Jeannie, it also looks like Mr. Jansen's from the city of Kerman joined us as well.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, everyone. Well, thank you very much for your time and attendance today. I think COG staff has put together a great agenda for us to go over today with a lot of really good information, a lot of hard work that they consistently do here. Want to make sure that there's all that transparency and that open communication. That's greatly appreciated. So we'll get started with our new items today. The first thing is going to be the RTP SCS Roundtable meeting minutes from the meeting on July 22nd of 2020. I did have just one small comment on that one. There was a typo as far as the attendees for members of the public. It said Jill Gromney of City of Fresno. That should be Jill Gormley. Aside from that, there was nothing else that really jumped off the page for me that I thought was not representative of the meeting. Does any other voting member or member of the public have any input on those meeting minutes? Okay, with that, we'll entertain a motion for acceptance.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Tina Sumner.
Thank you, Tina. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion to approve it.
Sal, thank you very much. Janine, can you call for the question?
For those of you voting, you'll see on the participant tab a yes and a no button. Please, only voting members should vote. If you're on the phone, once we've collected everyone's vote online, we'll go to the phone to take any votes that are over the phone. So you'll see a yes and a no tab on the bottom.
I'm not seeing that tab. This is Mike Brandini.
Mike, if you click on the bottom where it says participants and open the participant, you'll see an option for a yes or a no vote.
Yeah, it can look a little bit odd, Mike. When you click on participants, it will open up on the right side of the Zoom meeting window, and it will then show all the participants. And at the bottom of that screen right there, you'll see options for raise hand, yes, no, go slower, go faster. So it's yes or no right there. Should be a green check mark or a red X mark.
17 electronic votes. Are there any voting members over the phone? Press *6 to unmute yourself.
City of Sanger, yes.
FCRTA, yes.
PG, yes.
It's Fresno LAFCO, yes.
Fresno County, yes.
Okay.
We have 22 yes. We have a couple members that joined on the phone after we took roll. So we have 22 members voting yes.
All right. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we'll go to our next item now, which is the RTP 2020 Public Opinion Survey Report, and that will be Brenda Vienendahl presenting that today. Brenda, I'll hand it over to you.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you for being here. So yes, I'm going to be speaking about the RTP 2020 Public Opinion Survey Report. Earlier in 2020, well, in the spring of this year, the Fresno COG contracted with RIA and Parker Research to survey the Fresno County region's community members. RIA and Parker were given 10 community values and 9 transportation funding priorities that were identified by Fresno COG as helpful or applicable to RTP and ES development. They are listed in the survey report that was attached to our annotated item as well. The consultant was asked to survey a representative sampling of the public, ranking the list from higher priority to lower priority according to their responses. Along with these value and funding priority questions, the survey was planned to include some population information and some commuting information as well. 650 people responded to the telephone survey that was conducted by RIA and Parker, and a telephone sample that supplemented that of 300 respondents was added to that via online survey. When added together, the overall survey margin of error was plus or minus 3.2% at the 95% confidence level. A report summarizing the survey results, as I mentioned, was attached for review. But I would now like to introduce Richard Parker and Lou Ria of Ria and Parker Research, who are participating in the meeting, and they will provide a brief PowerPoint presentation of the survey findings, and staff and Mr. Parker and Mr. Ria will be happy to take questions following that.
Thank you, Brenda. My name is Richard Parker. I'm here with my co-principal, Lou Ray. We authored this report and did the survey. We want to thank you for offering us the opportunity to be a part of this project and to present it and the findings to you today. Thank you so much for that. Lou, are you online too?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. All right. So I guess I'll just sort of give instructions to go ahead. So let's go ahead and move to the first slide, or other than the title slide. So as Brenda mentioned, we ranked 10 community values in the survey. This is one of the two really fundamental objectives of the project. And you can see them listed here. I'll just read them briefly. If anybody thinks I'm taking up too much time doing that, you can just read them, but go ahead and read them. 1, neighborhoods should be designed for walking and bicycling. 2, be more multifamily housing made available. 3, continue developing communities that are predominantly single-family homes. Before I go any farther, these were rotated in the survey. So these were not the order for everybody. They were rotated in the telephone survey, they were rotated in the online survey, both. So don't fear that there was any bias in order. There was none. Provide more mixed residential and business-related projects within walking distance of transit. Preserve farmland and agricultural activities. Preserve open space in environmentally sensitive areas. Support a robust economy. Safeguard clean air. Reduce the effects of climate change, and invest in existing neighborhoods. A number of these were suggested as part of the RFP, and then in discussions, we refined them and added a few to them. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Okay. As Brenda also said, there were 9 transportation funding priorities that were included in the project. And we asked people to rate these, both these and the community values, on a 1 to 10 scale, which I'll discuss in just a second. So, repair potholes and maintain streets and roads, reduce traffic congestion and traffic delays, make roads and intersections safer, support technological innovative driving options, and then we had to give them some examples: more electric charging stations, self-driving vehicles, improve the local bus service, and then we listed the local systems. Support more shared mode transportation options. Again, we thought it could use an explanation, so we said carpools, Uber, van pools as possibilities. Maintain pedestrian walkways and sidewalks. Provide more walking and biking trails. Increase the number of bike lanes and bike paths. So we offered people 10 community values, 9 transportation funding priorities, and asked them to score them on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is very important and 1 was not at all important. So that was the basics of it. And then we added to that demographics, because we were asked to get a certain number of Spanish speakers. We were asked to get a certain representation of the rural county residents. And then the rest of it was to be weighted to get it according to the demographics of the county. So if we go to the next slide, I can discuss that. We had a margin of error of 3.2%, as Brenda said, at 95% confidence in the survey. That was 950 respondents. And once again, as she said, we had 650 telephone respondents and 300 online panelists. Among the telephone respondents, we had promised to get 150 cell phone and 150 in Spanish, people who preferred to speak Spanish. We got a couple more cell phone, so we ended up with 494 landline respondents and 156 cell phone. And of these 650, 500 of these surveys were conducted in English and 150 conducted in Spanish. In terms of the online panelists, no such requirements existed because you can't really control the respondents quite as well, or at all. Next one, please. Here are the demographics that we ended up achieving. And you can see here, one column is for raw data, the unweighted, the actual survey respondents. And then we weighted for the residential location, for the age of the respondent, and for ethnicity, which I'll discuss in a second. Income was weighted later, and let me get the explanation. So age. you can see we had an old population in our unweighted. 57 years was the median age. That means half the people were 57 or over and half the people were 57 or younger. Much of this is due to the online survey. The online survey had a strong retired response rate. All right, so that needed to be weighted to get it down to something that was more consistent with the county, which we did. The residential location, you can see down here, we had originally 61% from the city of Fresno, 15% from the city of Clovis, and 24% from the rural area. We worked very hard to get rural respondents, and they were tough to get. So we had to weight that up to the roughly 35% ratio that exists right now. So in weighting the responses, we ended up achieving a weighted distribution of 53% Fresno, 12% Clovis, 35% rural. Ethnicity, again, predominantly because of the online survey, was much more white and much less Latino than the population of the county is. So that required that we weight it, and weight it we did. So once you can see here also, we had a very high percentage of retired people, 31% down here toward the bottom. 31% of the population was retired. Once again, that's because of the online survey. But when we weighted for age, that took care of that, reduced it in half. So what we had, as you can see here, is originally we showed 34% full-time employee or full-time student, 21% not employed, 31% retired. Once weighted for age, that changed to 46% employed full-time, 23% not employed, and 15% retired. And the not employed people included those people who had been employed, but since the COVID pandemic had become unemployed. Other things didn't change much, didn't really require weighting. As you can see, males and females stayed the same after weighting, and the education pretty much stayed the same, 36% to 37% with a bachelor's degree or higher, 12% less than high school versus 11% after weighting. So no weighting was really necessary for any of that. As I mentioned, we also weighted for income, and the reason for that was once we weighted, especially in the ethnicity aspect, the income dropped significantly. So we had to then turn around and wait to get up to a proper income. So the analysis that follows is based upon this distribution over here in the right-hand column, which is a very good representation of the county. Okay, next slide, please. The slide that you see here is the ratings of the community values on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very important, 1 being not at all important. And what we have here are some high ratings. Let me get rid of something here that I are. Overall, some very high ratings, certainly above the midpoint. And if you look at the bottom of this slide, you can see the percentage of people who gave a rating of 8, 9, or 10 to each of these values, community values. And what you can see is the absolute lowest percentage was 53%. So over half the people in every single one of these gave the value and importance of 8 or higher. The rest of the percentages at the bottom are relatively coincident with the overall mean rating. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 8.55 was the average rating given for safeguarding clean air. 8.5 for preserving farmland. Those were the two highest community values. Safeguard the clean air and preserve farmland. At the lower end, but again, still high, you have the development of single-family homes at 7.29, a mixed residential business, the mixed development type plan at 7.28, and the least favorable was more multifamily housing, and again, still more than half the people said it's quite important. So before I talk about the transportation funding priorities, Lou Ray is going to dive down a little bit more deeply into some of these ratings and which groups tended to indicate that it was more important to them than were others. So, Lou?
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm Lou Ray, and I'm very pleased to participate today in presenting our report. Thank you very much. We are going to deal first or address the community values and the subgroups within the community values population. So this particular slide shows the population subgroups which place a high level of importance on most of the community values considered in this study. So that includes those whose language of survey preference is the Spanish language, generally high level of importance associated with that subgroup in community values. Those with an 8th grade education or less, those who have longer travel times, and those who commute by public bus. Next slide, please. Okay, these, again, with regard to community values, the subgroups, we're going to be talking about those subgroups which generally place a lower level of importance on the community values in this study. And those subgroups are those who commute by motorcycle, those with, who travel less than 10 minutes to work or school, whites, and those who are self-employed. All right, next slide, please. Okay, now here we're a little bit more detail. We selected from the last slide that Richard presented, the most important rated community values. We selected them out and identified the subgroups that find these values most important. So we have the three highest rated community values: safeguard clean air, preserve farmland and agriculture, or the first two, I should say, first two. And with regard to safeguarding clean air, that is most important for those whose language of survey preference is Spanish, 9.7, very high. And for those with an 8th grade education or less, 9.5. Regarding preserving farmland and agriculture, the second highest rated community value, the subgroups who find that most important are those whose language of survey preference is Spanish, 9.6, and those with an 8th grade education or less, 9.4, similar to, of course, the safeguarding clean air, they're similar. And we had one more, those employed students, 9.3. And then we selected the three lowest rated community values based on the chart that you saw earlier, and the subgroups that find these values least important. So if you recall, the three are developing single family homes, that's one of them, and those subgroups that find this community value least important are those that wish to continue developing predominantly single, those whose commute time is 10 minutes or less to work or school, 6.3, and students who are not employed, 6.6. Also low rated, but still high, but low rated on the scale, are those who prefer mixed residential and business related projects that are close to transit. those groups who subgroups who rated this low, whites, and those earning $75,000 or more annually, 6.5 each. And regarding more multifamily housing to be made available, that preference, also low rated, and the subgroups rating it low, are those who earn $150,000 or more annually, and that's 5.5, and whites, 6.0. Now, Richard will talk about the transportation priorities.
Richard, before you continue, do you want to take questions as we go?
That's fine.
Christine, you have your hand raised.
Yes. Lou, can you explain to us what the subgroups that place high level or low level of importance mean? I'm a little confused about the definition.
Okay, well, let's go back to the one that says community values, subgroups continued, not that one. Let's see. Okay. Is this, start this slide here. These subgroups place a high level of importance on most of the community values. In other words, these particular subgroups, these 4 subgroups we identified as consistently bringing up the fact that they associate a high level of importance with the community values generally, on balance, all the community values taken as a whole. These subgroups rate them highly. No particular one, just in general. And when we get to the next slide, it talks about, we take the next slide after this, please. And then in here, we're just talking about those subgroups in general who tend to talk about community values, who find them least important, who find the community values in general least important, are associated with these particular subgroups: motorcycle, 10 minutes to work, weights, and self-employed, and so on. But that's broad brush in general. And the last slide I talked about gets into a lot more detail, really, about specific community values and which subgroups rate them more important and less important. You want me to just mention that again a little bit more on that? For example, safeguarding clean air was rated highest of the community values. So we wanted to hone in on the highest rated community values and say which subgroups really rate and think that that community value is most important. And those whose language of survey preference is Spanish, 9.7, that's very high out of 10, consider safeguarding clean air most important, as well as those with less than an 8th grade education, 9.5, also regard safeguarding clean air as most important.
Let me chime in for a second here, Lou. The report has very detailed tables that list far more than these particular subgroups. This was just for presentation purposes, because for a presentation that would be, much too much. So if you look in the report itself, the report might have 5 or 6 groups that are high, and 3 or 4 groups that are low. And different numbers for different of these characteristics, but there's much more detail there. Plus, we have supplied the full list of all these means for every single question for every group.
So each of the 10 community values are associated in our report in matrix form with subgroups who consider them most important and least important.
Right. Plus, we've supplied everything in the appendix. Every single set of categorical means for every one of these questions.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess I'm back in now. All right. So we'll do the same thing for the transportation priorities on the next slide. So these are the funding priorities. And again, we asked people on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being very important, 1 being not at all important. How important to you is it that these get funded? And a couple things jump out here. First of all, the 3 highest rated ones are all rated higher than any of the community values. So people feel very strongly about repairing potholes and maintaining streets, about having safer roads and intersections, about maintaining sidewalks and walkways. I characterize this, or we characterize this in the report, as bread and butter sorts of preferences. That's what people want. You fix my potholes, keep my streets safe and maintained, and you know, we'd like to be able to take a walk on the sidewalks without tripping on a you know, one elevated element of a sidewalk over another. So these are 3 very highly rated ones. And again, the percentages, well, let's see, the percentages here at the bottom got cut off. I could show it to you if you wanted to transfer it to me, and I'll put it on my chart. But let me just tell you, you know, the percentages at the bottom here are very high. You can see, you know, 86% of the people have rated the priorities of repairing potholes and or maintaining streets at 86%. And again, all of them are above, you can't see it here now, all of them are above 50%, except for 1, and that was, I believe, the technologically innovative driving options. People didn't seem to be particularly in love with that concept. You see, it had a very low, it's still higher than midpoint, still higher than 5, but compared to everything else, it was a low priority, and less than half the people, see, I can take it, I think that's what it was, less than half the people rated that at 8 or above. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, and this will be something that Lou will go again and dive deeper into the subgroup analysis. And once again, let me say, the report goes into much greater depth on these subgroups, and you can find out the rating for any of the subgroups, any income level, any where they live, any ethnicity. It is all there. Just obviously not meant for a presentation like this. Okay, Lou, sorry.
All right. So this, I'm going to present 3 slides again, and the way to interpret this is very similar to what I did previously. Only instead of community values, we're going to be dealing with subgroups associated with the transportation funding priorities. So in general, and this slide just is in general, these are the subgroups that place a high value of importance on most of the transportation funding priorities. So it's a very broad brush view, but it just gives you an idea of where these subgroups are in terms of rating transportation priorities high. And those are, again, those whose language of survey preference is Spanish, those who commute by carpool, homemakers, those whose non-work and school travel time more than 1 hour, and those with an 8th grade education or less. Okay, next slide, please. And similarly, we present the subgroups that place a lower level of importance on most of the transportation priorities. So they're not giving the in general, there's a broad brush of those subgroups who do not give high ratings to the transportation priorities generally. And here we have those with a vocational school education, whites, those who commute by Uber and Lyft, those who commute by motorcycle, and those who are 75 years of age and over. Okay, the next slide, please. Now this gives somewhat more detail, nowhere near the detail you're going to get if you read the report and hone in on certain aspects that interest you, especially, but this is, it gives you an idea of the least and the most important. And again, similar to the community values, we selected the 3 top transportation priorities that Richard mentioned in the last bar chart that you saw. And These are the subgroups that regard repairing potholes and repair streets most important. They're most important for those with an 8th grade education or less, 9.8, and for those whose non-work school travel time is 30 minutes to an hour, 9.7. Regarding safer roads and intersections, the second highest transportation funding priority, it's most important for those with an 8th grade education or less, 9.6. For those whose non-work school travel is by motorcycle, 9.6 as well. And for carpool commuters, 9.5. And then the third highest transportation priority, maintaining sidewalks and walkways, most important for those whose dominant language is Spanish, 9.5, and for homemakers, also 9.5. And then similar to what we did with community values, we selected the lowest 3 rated transportation funding priorities and indicated here those subgroups which provide and indicated the lowest interest, the lowest rating for these low-end priorities. And so for increasing the number of bike lanes and bike paths, which was 3rd lowest, the subgroups associated here are those who commute by Uber or Lyft, 5.7, and retirees, 6.7. Second lowest, those who support shared mode transportation. Again, we're talking about carpool, vanpool, etc. While those subgroups rated it low, disabled and unable to work, 6.4, and those who earn $100,000 or more, 6.5. And the lowest rated transportation priority, technologically innovative driving options, example, electric charging stations and such, rated lowest among those with a vocational school education, those earning $100,000 or more, that's 5.7 each for those, as well as those who commute by Uber or Lyft, and homemakers, again, 5.9 each. And so that's our summary of subgroups, and that completes our presentation. And we certainly would love to address any other questions that you may have.
I do see one question that was submitted, and it says from Shelby Aaliyah, or is it? It says, do the differences between the subgroups reach the threshold for statistical significance? Yes, they do. In this case, now the ones we listed in the report, as you get toward the end of the list, they're more of a judgment call on our part that we think it's worth noting, even though it may not have achieved significance. But these are the extremes, and yes, they are significant. But in the report itself, some of the ones that are less high or less low in the table that we provided, in the matrix that we provided, some of those are not significant, but we thought worth mentioning, if that answers your question.
Mohammed, you have your hand raised?
Yes, this question is either for Lou or Richard. Can you please explain how did you select your survey target to represent a cross-section of the entire Fresno County population?
Okay, the telephone survey, the telephone portion was done by random digit dialing. And the process of random digit dialing achieves representativeness in most cases. When it doesn't, you weight the data, so long as you achieved a significant enough, or substantial enough, I should say, number that's worth weighting. So, if, for instance, you should have gotten like 100 people in a certain group and you ended up with 75, you weight it. But the process of random digit dialing does give you representativeness in more cases than not, but weighting takes care of any issues other than that. In the term of, in the online survey, not representative typically. We did the online survey for some other reasons that had to do with the structure of the questions that worked in an online format, maybe a little bit better than the telephone format, etc. But that threw some of those initial numbers off because we had a very old population, a retired population, a very white population, a very English-speaking population. You know, all that was in the so that definitely had to be weighted. But the telephone survey, you know, using random digit dialing was representative, or close to it. That adequate answer?
How about the online survey, Richard?
The online survey, no, you can't do anything about that. Online participants are not necessarily representative, and we accounted for that by weighting.
The reason I ask this question is most probably, people who live in incorporated cities have more access to computer and internet to be able to actually participate in an online survey compared to folks who live in unincorporated county areas.
Right.
And that's a concern that I have.
Well, that's why we got 24% response of rural in the raw data, which we weighted up to 35%. So the rural respondents, I mean, 24% of them, okay, good, thank you. So the rural respondents, we had 24% of the 950 people, so 230 or however many rural respondents, which is still a pretty good response rate of rural respondents, but we weighted it up to, you know, equivalent to 325 or so. So that's the weighting process accomplishes that, but we still got a decent number who responded. But you're correct. It was the online survey that was very much biased. Well, I hate to use the word biased, but very much skewed, I should say, toward white people, older people, even though you always think of younger people online, but it's frequently the older people who are part of these panels of online participants. So, you know, and whites, which is why you see high number of whites, older, fewer rural, but every one of those was weighted appropriately. The 45% whites were weighted down to 31%, the 57-year-old people were weighted to 43%, and the 24% rural were weighted to 35%. Lou, did you want to add something to what I just said?
No, I think that says that weighting makes all the difference. And it's a very common procedure in surveying.
Is that an adequate answer?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question.
Richard, Lou, we have a question in the chat from Carolina asking if you could repeat the gender split. She thought you said 62% were male and 38% were female, but in the report it looks like 62% were female and 30% were male.
Yeah, I guess that I'll take the blame for that. Yeah, if that was it, Lou, you have the report in front of you, or I can.
I do here, yeah, part of it. What page are you referring to, Carolina?
Well, just the chart on male and female. The chart one.
I don't have the page number, but really, I think I was just curious about
I think
the split being so different.
It's my error.
Is there anything that you know, if 62% and 38% one way or the other, it just seems like it's kind of not a very well balanced split. So would that have any effect on some of the results?
Yeah, we have it reversed on the chart.
Yeah, this chart is wrong. Apologize for that. There were, as you saw, there were no differences between the men and the women in terms of being more in favor or less in favor of anything. It didn't show up. So I would tend to say no. You know, in other words, if if men showed up as being more in favor of something or less in favor of something, or on the list of people who rated community values higher or community values lower, whatever, they didn't show up at all. And if I remember, there weren't all that many in the full-blown tables in the report, meaning there were really no differences between men and women.
Richard?
Yes?
Which, is it the report chart on page 11 that's mixed up, or the presentation chart?
This is wrong. This
Presentation.
PowerPoint.
Okay.
This PowerPoint is incorrect.
Okay.
Lewis and Richard, this is Tony Bourne. I tried to send in the chat, but I couldn't figure out how to send the question. But my question is this. So I went back and I dug out the survey that we had done of the community values back in 2005 before we went out for our Measure C reauthorization. And pretty much they line up the same, right? In 14 years, 15 years, things haven't changed that much in terms of the community values. My question is this: your slides seem to infer that the automobile-centric improvements are the top transportation priorities for the respondents, which seems at odd with the top-ranked community value, which is clean air. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. And I think you're asking people to maybe think a little bit more deeply into this than they do. In other words, they say, yeah, I drive and I want the potholes cleaned up and stuff. And sure, yeah, I want clean air too.
So they're really not making the connection between their automobile and the impacts on our clean air.
Right. I want you to ride the bus. I don't want to.
The bus is great, as long as they're loaded.
Right. That's a relatively typical thing. But, you have a population here looking at this chart that's, we have 77% of people who drive alone to work or to school. That's what they do. So they are going to want the potholes taken care of. They're going to want safe streets and intersections. And when you ask them what their values are, they want clean air, but does that necessarily mean that they're willing to give up their car? Not necessarily. And therein lies one of the really problematic issues in transportation planning, as we all know.
Thank you. One of the things we talked about a little bit on our staff meeting today was the fact that we're going to go out and do, consider going out for early reauthorization of our measure, and we're going to do some survey of polling of likely voters. And so that's different. Those results are likely to be different from what we have here, right? Because one is the Measure C cares about the voters, because in the end, they're the ones that are going to pass judgment on whether or not the sales tax should be extended, not necessarily the respondents to this survey.
Correct. If you're looking for something that's going to help you gauge your policy towards getting a particular measure passed, then yes, you can't necessarily rely on this as to be typical of voters. But it makes a lot of sense. I would not be surprised if you end up with pretty similar sorts of responses.
Right. I would have thought just intuitively that the responses here would have been a little bit more aspirational, shall we say, as opposed to, the voter who tends to just, quite often look at his wallet, shall we say, particularly in the light of a sales tax.
Well, I don't know, this is pretty typical of the way people think. People aren't, particularly now, they're not that aspirational. You're looking at some pretty nuts and bolts issues that people are confronting right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's notable to mention that the survey was conducted, I think the bulk of it was May and June. Is that correct?
It's in the report. Lou, do you have, it's right there up front in the report.
Time frame.
I mean, I'd have to close down my Zoom thing here. I guess I could do that.
Is it in the beginning of the report?
Yeah,
to my recommendation, my
it's in the
recollection,
methodology.
it was May, June. So it was when the economy was, things were getting a little better with the pandemic. It wasn't at the beginning. It wasn't now where obviously where the air quality is so bad. So it was maybe a little more measured than March, April, I would assume. But
It's, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I know, just me, I've been concerned about it from the beginning. So I don't feel any ebb and flow in my feelings about it. I don't know about other people.
any other questions?
I saw a question just pop up.
In the chat.
From Tina.
Let me call up the chat here and see.
I can read it.
Actually, this is Tina, and my question really, Brenda, was more for you, not specific to the details of the survey that have been presented, but more kind of background information about how is all of this detailed demographic information going to be used in our process?
Excellent question, and I expected somebody to ask this, and I'm gonna hand it over to Seth to talk more specifically, but a lot of these priorities and values were things that will easily transfer ideas and types of transportation that can easily transfer into building the different SCS scenarios. And so Seth was integral in figuring out the types of things we needed to know to be able to feed in that process. Seth, would you mind speaking to that?
Sure, I'd love to. So there's going to be a few applications for this information, not least of which is the development of the scenarios. You know, the scenarios are going to be based off of a series of strategies that have their foundation in these types of decisions about values and funding priorities and those sorts of things. And we have, now not to steal my own thunder from later on in this meeting, I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but the Ics Technical Committee had its first meeting last week. And that's one of the things that the committee is eventually going to tackle is on a technical level, determining how to translate things like results from this community survey into strategies that go into the various scenarios. And so without bogging down this meeting with too many details, that's sort of where this is going. And of course, different scenarios can, within whatever range the committee and ultimately the roundtable and the board decide, once the scenarios are developed, we can deviate. Like we can take into account the results of these survey and be like, okay, we want one of the scenarios to just be down the line what the survey says. Maybe other scenarios can take deviations from that in more, proactive ways. I hope that answers that question. I'm happy to elaborate more.
I'd like to chip in something, if I might. This is Richard Parker. Keep in mind that almost everything was highly rated. So the fact that people want their potholes fixed doesn't necessarily mean that they won't approve something that's more aspirational. There were quite a few of these that were rated very highly, almost all of them rated very highly. So just because some might have been rated more highly than others doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a difficult time in a campaign doing things that are more aspirational.
And Meg commented that the policy element subcommittee will review and consider the data when they're developing the policies that will be included in the RTP chapter.
And I think, this is Rob Terry, if I could just add too, I think it's extremely important, the demographics, excuse me, while there might not be the very blatant specific use of where these items are going to plug in and what that information means, I think if nothing more, even just the optics of being able to really communicate to the public that effort was put in to try to understand from from each area within the demographics of our region, feedback, content, feelings, beliefs, priorities. I think that's extremely important to be able to communicate so that it really comes across as fair and as unbiased and inclusive as possible. So the optics of it, I think, also needs to play a part in what we do, as any public process should.
Right, and remember, you can take, again, Richard Parker again, you can take a slice, a strata out, anything. You could say, all right, I'd like to see what the Latino population responded to each and every one of these questions, and it's there. It's in the appendix to the report. You can find that. So there's a hell of a lot of information available that obviously you can't put into a quick, how it wasn't so quick after all, but a PowerPoint presentation. Yes, I think you could definitely make that argument that you have a lot of information and a lot of effort finding out about all kinds of subgroups.
Mohammed, you had a question?
I do. I don't know if the question is for the consultants or staff. How would the result of the survey and the priorities that were established by the survey will impact allocation of funding to different type of projects?
That largely, Mohammed, depends on this group, I think, because there are, the funding priorities, of course, will have an effect on the types of projects that receive higher weighted scores from the scoring criteria and those sorts of things. But it essentially starts with the roundtable in determining, what they want those weights to be. And I guess it'll start in the Ics Technical Committee. A lot of the technical hashings back and forth is going to happen at that level, but no decisions are made at that level. The first decision-making body to make those sort of judgment calls is this one, is the roundtable. And so it'll start with discussions right here.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
So I will fix that error in the table and get that to you immediately so that doesn't continue. And I guess the best part of that was the person who caught it was a former student of ours. It was some pleasure that as teachers, we created somebody who came back and got us. Thank you, Caroline.
Brenda, is this an action item? Do we need?
No, this is an information item only. It's just to be reviewed, and you can provide direction at your discretion at this point, but it is an information item.
Yeah, that was going to be my feedback right now. I think out of respect for time, we are about halfway through our total allotted time for the meeting, and do still have a lot more content that we need to make sure that we are covering, and some actions that need to be taken here. So unless there are any additional items that need to be addressed immediately with this item, then I feel that it's appropriate for us to move on to our next item.
Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate having had this opportunity.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. Again, guys, not an action item. So if there is any additional feedback, comments, questions, concerns that you have, please make sure that you reach out to Brenda and direct those items to her so that they can continually be addressed and we can be ready for action when it needs to be taken in the future as appropriate with that item. So with that said, we're going to move on to item C, project scoring criteria. Suzanne, will you take the lead?
Hey, Rob, this is Braden. Suzanne literally just texted me saying that her Zoom froze and she's going to need a second to get back up. I don't know how.
Okay, not a problem. Do you guys want to go ahead and go to item D, and then we'll come back to Suzanne when she's logged back on? Or would you, COG staff, do you want us to wait for Suzanne to come back on? Christine, any thoughts on that?
I think we can go ahead and move to item D.
Okay,
Seth.
Terrific. Seth, would you mind taking on the RTP mapping capabilities for us?
Not at all. Would love to. Hello again, everybody. So this is an information item, so I'll be brief. Essentially, what we're looking to do is incorporate a spatial mapping element in our RTP. And let's see. Kai, do you have a presentation from me on this?
No, I don't. But you can share your screen.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't prepared to have this up right now. So I'll be talking on the fly while I do this. But I apologize. Okay, so we're in our call for projects, we are incorporating a GIS component. So every project will have spatial data attached to it. And so for the first time, we'll be able to take project information and display it on a map with all of the information of the projects. And that means that we can analyze projects at that level. Let's see, where's my... Again, I apologize, everybody. Trying to think on my feet and it's not really working right
You
now.
thought you had more time, Seth, so our apologies.
Yeah.
Jump ahead.
Oh, it's all right. It would be the same because I thought my presentation would be up, but I think maybe it's here. It is not here. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to move on ahead. I apologize for not being prepared, but so what we did was staff went through the 2018 constrained list, and we were able to, through an immense effort from a lot of us on staff, because there's a lot of work, we took the thousands of projects that were in the constrained list and we mapped them out onto a master network, and we presented that to Eco Interactive, who does our who handles Fresno Track, calling in projects and those sorts of things. And so they've incorporated it on their end. We also have that information now, and so we are able to do some analyses as far as where projects are located. We can answer questions such as what types of projects are where they are spatially located in the county, what sort of distribution of dollar investments do we have in certain areas. This will be very helpful for things like EJ analysis and those sorts of things. And once I find what's where I put my presentation, I'll be able to show some of these maps. Let me do it this way. I think this will be.
Throwing this out there just to be flexible, everyone. I think Suzanne is back on the line if we want to maybe go back to her and give Seth more time to get his presentation up.
I would love that if that's okay with the committee.
Yes, Suzanne, are you with us? She's having trouble connecting too, guys. In all reality, we can't even jump to item E and then circle back around. Meg, if you would be ready to take that one.
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
So this is the request for proposals for legal services for the development of the 2022 RTP SCS, EIR, and RENA plan. Fresno COG released a request for proposals on August 10th for legal services associated with the development of 3 planning efforts over the next couple of years. These efforts are the RTP SCS, the Program Environmental Impact Report for the RTP SCS, and the 6-cycle Regional Housing Needs Allocation Plan. Best, and Krieger provided legal counsel for the development of the 2018 RTP SCS and EIR. And since the 2022 RTP SCS development is happening in tandem with the 6-cycle Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RENA, we feel that it would be beneficial to have legal counsel for all 3 of these efforts. For those of you who are not familiar with RENA, it's the process of distributing the number of housing units that the state says our region must plan for to each of the local jurisdictions. Tasks under this legal services contract would include reviewing and providing feedback on draft documents, advice regarding certain technical analyses, guidance for public noticing and hearing procedures, and assistance with responses to comments. The contract amount would be to not exceed $75,000 and is expected to kick off in October. Proposals are due on Monday, August 31st, and we anticipate holding interviews on Wednesday, September 8th. And Fresno COG is seeking representatives of the RTP Roundtable to participate in the consultant selection process, since typically the RTP Roundtable would approve the consultant selection. However, we're under a tight timeline to get legal counsel on board for when we start RENA in October. And more information is included in the RFP on our website if you are interested and want to take a look. And this is just an information item, but I'd be happy to take any questions or any volunteers that would be willing to participate in the consultant selection process. Thanks.
Thank you, Meg. I know this is Rob Terry. I think it's important to point out here that the information being presented, this is not contracts for like the EIR. This is not a contract for a consultant to actually conduct the RENA allocation plan. This is simply to have one consistent legal review voice for those multiple items that are all included within this. And I think that this allows for much more consistency and much more efficiency through the process as well. So I think this is an excellent thing to do through this round here. I know as I read through that item, it very much felt to me like it will allow there to be much more consistency throughout that, as opposed to having multiple legal teams that might weigh in on various opinions. And that would not bar COG from being able to receive additional legal opinions as appropriate, but it would create the one consistent voice as they're going through the multiple processes that all link to each other in many ways. With that said, I'll open it up to the rest of the group if there's any comments or questions. Okay, terrific. We look forward to inclusion from the roundtable. Meg, I know you'll be reaching out to the roundtable to look for committee members to be engaged in that selection process. So certainly look forward to that and understand the time limitations and sensitivity and the reason why it's being delivered the way it is. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Suzanne, are you back with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Terrific.
Okay, good. I apologize. I'm not going to put on my video because that's what froze me out. Every time I try to start my video, it froze my whole screen. So I'm just going to have to do this without video for now. So agenda item number C, well, letter C, the RTP Programming Technical Working Group. We've developed this draft project scoring criteria for this 2022 RTP. The document that was attached to the agenda represents the results of 3 meetings where participants reviewed the guidelines from the 2018 plan and updated them for this 2022 RTP. Functional and purposeful changes were made, including the addition and removal of criteria, the points awarded per question, the application of certain criteria to multiple project modes, and general verbiage updates throughout. One significant change from the 2018's criteria is the categorization of submitted projects. In the previous plan, each project belonged to only one of 5 modes that we had. We had a bike and ped, capacity increasing, maintenance, operations, and transit. And each project was evaluated strictly by the criteria applicable to the chosen mode. But in this round, the approach was taken to allow the multimodal projects to be evaluated by all applicable criteria to the project, which allows for more flexibility in how projects are scored and funded. Lastly, I just really like to thank those who participated from this roundtable. I know a lot of people. I recognize a lot of the names, and I want to thank you for participating in the working group. Your focus and detailed engagement was just so invaluable to this process, your experience and expertise, so thank you. So with that, we're presenting this draft scoring criteria for discussion and approval, and staff requests that the RTP Roundtable recommend that the Fresno COG Policy Board approve the 2022 RTP project evaluation criteria. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
And just to ensure clarity here, Suzanne, all items that come from the RTP Roundtable go as recommendations. They then are delivered when time possible, of course, to TTC and to PAC for the same type of recommendation, showing what the recommendation from the Roundtable was, and then, of course, ultimately going to the Fresno COG Policy Board for ultimate approval or adoption, correct?
Yes, absolutely. It'll go from here. If it's approved here, it'll go to TTC and then PAC and then the Fresno COG Board.
Okay, so just to make sure that all the committee members do understand, especially those of the public agencies, you know, lead administrators, your TTC PAC representatives, as well as your elected officials that are included within the policy board will all have the opportunity to hear this and consider this as well.
And we do have a question from Nick Palladino.
Yes. Now that I've had a chance to look at this latest version in detail, I spotted several things I may have missed at the last committee meeting. And of course, interest of time, perhaps, if Suzanne agrees, I just go over my questions in one fell swoop. They may be able to be answered yes, no, real fast.
Okay.
Let me see here real quick. If I look down here, the first one, if I can find it here, it's on question number 8, improves air quality. It says 8 points. In your notes, you have a maximum of XX points.
Yes, that should be 8. I noticed that and I fixed it, but I had, it didn't go in the PDF one that I had sent. So I went through and I fixed it. It should say 8.
Okay. On question number 13, relieves congestion. The first number 1, you know, hang on a second. 2 points, improves LOSF for urban or LOSD or worse for rural. And then the second 1 point, project has parallel facilities within a mile that operates at LOSF for urban or LOSE for rural. You mean E or F, or E or D?
I believe, let's see, improves LS for urban or LSD or worse for rural.
Yes,
Oh yeah, because up there it's D for the 2 points and down here it's E. I don't know if that was, I'm not sure if that was intentional. Projects have parallel facilities in a mile that operates. Yeah, it probably should be D because I think they were all supposed to be the same, unless anybody in the that participated in the subcommittee thinks that it should be different. But I think that they should both say LOSD.
That was my recollection as well. It was supposed to be D.
Yeah, D or worse to be consistent.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me. I'm typing that in now. I have it open on my screen, so I'm gonna type in that quick fix. LSD or worse.
Or worse.
Okay. Yeah.
And then question number 16. It's 4 points in the notes. The last sentence, it reads a maximum of 2 points may be awarded.
Okay. Yes, that one needs to be fixed. I will fix that one right now. 4 points.
Okay.
Okay.
Those are the 3 things I caught.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and I should probably add that there are some notes that we are adding to questions number 3 and 4. We didn't have them at the time, but we are going to add for number 3 under the notes. We are going to add some examples that would include the examples that we're adding for number 3 would be incorporated shaded bus stops or cool pavements to adapt to extreme heat, enhanced drainage capacity or permeable pavements for flooding issues, and then usage of fire resistant materials, concrete pipes, steel to adapt to wildfires. And then we're still going to put a link to that study, to a study that was done, but we don't have the link yet, but it will be live once we, before we publish this. And then for number 4, hold on, number 4, yes. For the disabilities question, we provide a link to the CDC's website that discusses, accessibility barriers, so they can kind of get a understanding of what those barriers might be. I put a couple of things in there: lack of relevant assistive technology, inaccessible physical environments, systems, services, policies that hinder involvement. And then, so I just put a couple of them in there, and then we're going to add a link to the CDC website that describes all of the barriers.
Mohammed, raised.
Yes. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question is on number 13. Are you going to change it at level of service D or worse, or E or worse?
D.
Okay. LOSD or worse for rural?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure which alphabetical you're going to go with, either D or E. So it is LOSD or worse for rural. Okay, I got you.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or concerns about the criteria?
Suzanne, this is Carolina. I raised my hand, but I'm not sure if it showed up. But I just wanted to say, that it was a great process to participate on the subcommittee, and I really appreciate the effort to integrate all of the different modes into one set of criteria. This is really, I think, an innovative approach, and it's really great to see this taking shape. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I thank you guys for your participation. It was really helpful. Is there any other questions or comments?
Okay, this is an action item here, so we will be needing approval from the committee. So unless there are any additional questions or comments they would like to make, we can entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve, Chairman.
Thank you, Mohammed. Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Sal. Appreciate it. Jeannie, can you call for the question, please?
For those of you who are a voting member online, please use the yes or no buttons and at the bottom of the participants tab. And those on the phone, I'll go ahead and call out. Moses?
Yes.
George? George with LAFCO?
Yes.
Napalo?
Yeah, I also check marked.
Dave? Dave Berlick?
Yes.
I think that's everybody.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
20.
And Suzanne, again, thank you very much for your hard work on that. I know that was a lot of meetings and a lot of coordination that goes into that, but that's just one more thing that makes this region so great, is the fact that all of us work hard to really work together and understand each other, and COG just really highlights that with these type of efforts. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, moving back to item D for the RTP mapping capabilities. Seth, are you ready, or should we move to another item?
Yes, I am ready, but it looks like Zoom is not ready for me. Host has disabled participant screen sharing. So I'll keep trying this, but I have some maps up here, and I wanted to preface these. Here we go. I wanted to preface these by pointing out that these maps that I'm about to show are not at all inclusive of what we are capable of doing. These are all for demonstrative purposes only. These were some maps that I put together to show the sorts of analyses that we can do. And it's our hope as staff that this would spark the imagination of people involved in the process and stakeholders like the people here at this committee, at this roundtable, to think about what they would like to see in the future. And so again, I have 5 quick maps that I wanted to show. Again, these weren't the result of any process other than me just sitting down and thinking up what people might want to see. More opportunities are available for different types of analyses. This first one is just a map of all the projects, and they're color coded by mode. Again, for the last round, we had everything bifurcated into these 5 modes: bike and ped, capacity increasing, maintenance, operations, and transit. The point features are point projects like intersection projects or new bus stops, those sorts of things. And the line projects are projects that apply to segments of road. And so that's what this map is showing. The next map, this shows those same projects by cost. And so the thicker the segment or the bigger the dot, the more the overall project costs. And so you kind of get a visual idea. You can see that the transit projects are well, they cover a longer area. And so you can see that they are comparatively costly compared to other types of projects. Now we can do some overlay type things. These are the EJ areas from the 2018 RTP, colored here in orange. And you can see the locations of all the projects and where they take place. And we did a little bit of cost analysis where we looked at the projects that intersect or serve these EJ areas versus those that do not. And we showed that, so the EJ population last round, I believe, was 35% of the population was represented in EJ areas. And you can see that 49% of the total budget that went to fund projects in the constrained list were serving these EJ areas. So this is another type of analysis that we can do. We can look at things like spatial investment in certain areas. We can do the same thing with low-income areas. These are low-income areas as designated by Senate Bill 535. I believe the threshold is 80% below the median household income for California. You can see that as we get to the statewide data sets, the inclusion area in Fresno County becomes larger because Fresno County is among the more challenged, if not the most, I don't know if it's the most challenged by a lot of these metrics in county in the state, but it's up there. But we did a similar thing here where we looked at, what total investment are we putting in what's considered low-income communities, and we can see that 3/4 of our project are going to those areas, or 3/4 of the total cost of these projects are going to these areas. And lastly, we're just now looking at bike and ped projects compared to Cal Enviro Screen, which maps out pollution burden. So trying to get people more active, those sorts of things. This would be a kind of map that we might want to see, looking at where's the bike and ped investment? Is it in these health burdened areas or in these pollution burdened areas? And if you look at our in our RTP, the last round, 88.2% of the investment went to those areas. Again, these are all just examples of things that we can do now. We're really excited that we'll have this capability moving forward. Every round, the call for projects will include updating and or verifying these information. So we'll be able to do these sorts of things. And this is the result of ever since our 2014 RTP, we've been getting requests, can we see a map of all the projects? And, unfortunately, no, we haven't had that capability, but now yes, we can. So we're pleased to report that. Happy to take any questions. Again, this is an information item.
That's awesome capacity to be able to have, Seth. I think that that COG staff ability to be able to not only present data in ways that make sense, but also to then provide the graphics that help communicate that even further. I think is critical, not only for staff, but even more so for the general public, to really be able to see what that means on the ground, not just on a spreadsheet, right? The things that we deal with all day, every single day. So it's great to have the tools to be able to do that. It's even more wonderful to have the staff that COG has to be able to put that forward. So as always, we know that COG has incredible staff. I would argue the best in the nation. Probably a bit biased on that, but that's just my personal opinion. Thank you very much.
Rob, if I can, this is Christine. I just want to add that since the first SCS in 2014, we have received a request to have this project, RTP project mapping capacity or capability. Also, request for us to develop an activity-based model. Those are two major undertaking that Fresno COG has been working on in the last couple of years. Takes about a couple of years for this mapping capabilities to be developed, and also 3 or 4 years for the activity-based model to be developed. So right now for 2022 RTP SCS, we are going to apply these two capabilities into our all our activities.
Mohammed, do you have a question?
Yes. Question is for Seth. Seth, do you guys need any additional locational information for projects to be able to actually show it on maps?
No, from here on out. So what we've done is we as staff in-house have gone through the spreadsheets, of all the projects, and we've read the description of the projects and we've mapped it. So we have that information for 2018, but also what's going to happen is that when the member agencies go in and either amend that list or add, change it, add to it, they're going to either verify or change that information for each project. And so we'll have an ongoing maintenance of this data set as well every time we have a call for projects with a new RTP update. And that's all incorporated into the same software platform where we do our call for projects. And so we'll be getting the information from the member agencies as they submit the projects. And actually from here on out, we should be able to get all projects, even those on the unconstrained list. Any submitted project will have GIS information for.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments or questions for staff? Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. We've already addressed item E, so we're going to go to item F, Regional Transportation Plan Project Suggestions for Virtual Public Workshops for Online Input. And Brenda.
Thank you again. Yes, so Fresno COG is looking for project suggestions from community members that could be submitted by our local agencies for inclusion in the RTP. Community members may be able to use our online mapping tool, or as we call it, the 2020 Transportation Needs Survey, to submit street, road, transit, bikeway, trail, safety, new tech, EV, and other types of transportation project suggestions. This approach to RTP project outreach began during the last RTP update, and during that effort, over 1,200 project suggestions were submitted for consideration by local agencies. Fresno COG implemented the approach to lessen the public outreach burden on our member agencies. We heard that a lot of them were not able to do a lot of public outreach on the various projects that the public was interested in, and to give the public an opportunity to weigh in with their project suggestions and things they wanted to see prior to moving forward in other phases of RTP development and outreach. The survey will be available in Spanish, English, and Punjabi specifically, because our mini grants will be outreaching in those languages. However, there is a link to it that includes a Google Translate if it works for rougher translations in more languages than you can possibly imagine. The survey is scheduled to go live on September 8th and will remain open until October 15th. If we get a bulk of responses prior to the 15th, closer to the 1st of October, we'll begin downloading those list of project considerations and suggestions and sending those out to the transit agencies and our local member agencies as well. All project suggestions will be forwarded and the survey will close on October 15th. The call for projects, as you know, opens November 1st, 2020. So we wanted to give them as much time as possible to consider the projects of regional significance. Accompanying virtual workshops and access to the needs survey will be advertised through various means, through our mini grant organizations and Fresno COG staff. Invitations and requests for project suggestions will be posted to websites, social media, emailed to various databases, advertised through traditional media and social media advertisements, and even phone banking through Inspiration Transportation, who is proposing to do that as part of their mini grant. The online survey being developed, and I tell you, they're releasing new technology for us to incorporate into our survey today, so I'm waiting on that. Excited about that. It's like Santa's workshop back here. The online survey being developed for project suggestions will request that participants open a map. Well, there'll be a map of Fresno County, and all they need to do is select the type of project they want to recommend or suggest, and then drop a dot or draw a line on the map where their suggested project is located. And then a comment box will pop up. They fill in information about what that project is, and it automates and goes into a back-end system where we can pull all comments together. All outreach opportunities, meetings, links, etc., will be posted to the new RTP website at planfresno.com in several areas, but primarily under public participation, but also in the timeline and definitely latest news. And we're asking our member agencies and roundtable members, community organizations for outreach opportunities as well. We're looking for email distribution lists or to be forwarded out to email distribution lists, for commitments to share our social media posts and email blasts announcing the transportation needs survey, and for local agencies to share this opportunity to participate with their community members in any way that works for you. I know some of them have call systems, but each community is different. All of these opportunities should be communicated to me, and I will be also communicating with you as we move closer to launch date. There will be, I don't think I mentioned, accompanying virtual workshops that our member agents are not a member, our mini grant agencies will be hosting, and then Fresno COG will also be hosting one as well. We'll also be sharing the opportunity to participate at our regular meetings. It will be, I'm sure, on the next RTP Roundtable agenda. And so there'll be lots of opportunity to participate in this. Again, it's a simple survey, I think very, very effective. I can't wait to show it to you. We should have it well together within the next week, way ahead of launch date. This is an information item only, but I'd be happy to take questions about the survey or the process, and I look forward to hearing from you about any opportunities to reach the community with an opportunity to weigh in.
Brenda, can participants provide multiple areas of input or even come back more than once, a week later, days later, whatever it's going to be? Or is it once an IP address has logged something into that, is it like one submission only?
Good question. I got clarification this morning that you can submit multiple projects, multiple types of projects. It will recognize you if you go back into the system, and so it won't ask you your demographic questions again. It won't ask you for your email address if you want to submit that kind of thing, but you should be able to submit projects. I don't think there's a limit on how many projects. That's the technology they're releasing right now. We were going to have to ask people to tell us the type of project, and it was a little more involved. And now they'll be able to just pick an icon that matches, hey, this is a transit project, here's an icon for that, and they just stick it onto the map. A comment box pops up, they type in what it is they'd like to see in that area, and we're good to go. It's very simplified. But again, it's new, I haven't seen yet. So yes, you should be able to add several different projects or types of projects.
Excellent. Look forward to seeing that.
We do have a comment from Keith Berthold, and it's more Brenda. They just want to help us get out the outreach process broadly, get out the surveys, get out the.
Wonderful. I will contact each of you, George and Keith. I'll contact each of you directly to find out how best to do that.
Thank you, Brenda. Any other comments or questions from the group? Okay, guys. Well, that takes care of our new items for today. So we'll go to section 3 here, under items, and we will start with items from staff. Christine, any of your staff there that have any additional updates or items they want to bring before the group?
Seth does have one.
I do, yes. I wanted to give a brief update on, at the last meeting, I talked about the starting of what we're calling the SCS Technical Committee. Like I mentioned before, we had our first meeting last week. I thought it was super helpful. I thought people seemed engaged, and I thought it was a very, very good meeting. We talked about the development of the futures. I presented a couple times to this group about what that means and where we're going with that, with the SCS process. And so we're going to continue that work twice a month until we have something to present to the roundtable. After that, the group will also be talking about performance indicators and which performance indicators we feel like are most congruent with the futures that we chose. And then we'll probably take a break. And then down the line, when we're getting ready to develop the scenarios, the SCS Technical Committee will do a lot of the work about how we are going to implement the strategies and what kinds of scenarios, you know, to put out there. And again, everything that comes out of the Technical Committee comes to this group for discussion and approval. Anyone here is welcome to join that group. I believe everyone here is on the mailing list, the distribution list for meeting notices as they come out. We meet on an as-needed basis, which will be pretty much every twice a month until we complete those two things. On the first and third Wednesdays, same time slot as this meeting. And so this meeting is bookended every month because this is the third Wednesday. So this is the second Wednesday. I don't know where we are. Third Wednesday maybe. Anyway, on either side of this meeting, there should be SCS technical committees. And so if you haven't gotten notification from me, please send me an email, sscott@fresnocog.org, and I'll make sure that for some reason, you got left off. Also check your spam folders, all that kind of thing. If you're interested in taking part, we have great discussions, and that's a great place to get your hands dirty in really influencing what the technical details of all of these moving parts look like. So thank you. Happy to answer any questions about that.
Thank you, Seth. Appreciate it. Any questions from anyone in the group? Okay, Christine, any other staff members that have additional updates they'd like to share?
I don't believe so.
Okay. With that, we'll move to any items from members. I do not have any additional items to share. Are there any of the voting members that have items they want to bring before the group? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons that are wishing to address the roundtable on items within its jurisdiction, but that are not already on the agenda and have not already been spoken of. Please note that any public member can make any comment they wish to at this time. Unscheduled comments may be limited to 3 minutes. With that said, do we have any public members that are attending today that have anything they would like to add? Okay, hearing none, guys. Just want to remind everybody that our upcoming meeting next will be September 23rd, 2020 from 2 to 4 p.m. You can see, of course, the other dates listed right on there. And with that, I know we're a few minutes ahead of schedule, but I don't think anybody will complain about that. So unless there's any last minute comments before, then we'll go ahead and end things up.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Talk to y'all next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine,
Yes.
I can't believe my, like as soon as I try to hit start video, like, cause it was going to be my turn, it froze the whole thing. I was like, oh crap.
That's always the case. Yeah.
Oh my God. I think I might have to just because then when I logged back in and did it again, and then I tried the same thing, I hit start video and it froze again. I'm like, oh my God. So I think I might have to just restart my whole computer, but